So this will be an interesting experiment because Caroline is awake and up and about, whereas in the past we've done this when she's been asleep. So
Yeah. But I feel like it'll be okay. I don't think what little noise she will do in the background will be a problem.
no, these mics are pretty good about noise canceling and stuff like that. So
She seems pretty proud of herself that she's getting to basically do whatever she wants.
oh, did you see her eyes light
She's like,
up?
so I can do whatever I want. But I told her, I was like, when you're picking a snack, I was like, you can't pick candy.
Right.
I told her, I said, this is a real opportunity for you to show us how responsible you can be. And she's like, all right, Mom, I got this. I'm like, mm-hmm.
Well, we're 3.5 weeks into more or less being quarantined.
Yeah,
It's been quite the experience.
it was 3 weeks on Wednesday.
Yeah. All of us here in the house trying to do the homeschool thing.
And my school thing.
Yeah, your online stuff. And
Your work thing.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people have been saying like, "Oh, it must be nice to have a break." No,
This is not a break.
if anything, I'm editing harder than I ever have. Although I have made some changes, and it's really not related to the pandemic so much as just recognizing that I need to control my own stress and get into more of a cadence where in the past I was in a sprint,
Yeah, always.
always in a sprint.
Adrenaline high, 24/7.
And what was unfortunate about that is that I didn't really have a clearly defined finish line that I was sprinting towards. And, what has it been? 2 years of full-time
Yeah.
YouTube.
Uh-huh.
And finally realized, okay,
2 years, April 1st.
hey, that's right.
Mhm.
That's exactly right. So, yeah, I definitely find a better cadence now. I've taken 2 Sundays off in a row now
Yeah, that's huge.
of no editing or, other business and
Your
stuff like
first
that.
one was a little rough.
Yeah.
You had bug eyes every once in a while.
Oh, yeah,
But your second one, you seemed like you liked it.
I did.
So tomorrow we'll see how you like your third one.
Oh, yeah. So I think the key is I've been taking the hammock out to our little bunch of trees, like the only trees.
Our only cluster of trees.
And just spending, a couple hours out there reading or not doing anything, just watching the clouds and listening to the birds. And it's been an interesting time, very introspective and recentering. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah, you spend hours out there.
yeah,
It's not like, oh, you're just going out for 30 minutes. You've done 2 to 4 hours.
that's it. And the main thing is to not be on your phone, because when you're on your phone, you drift. You're either mindlessly scrolling or, oh, I had this idea, so now you're working on something. And so the key is to just truly unplug. And I think it's important for all of us to do that. So yeah, that's been great. And then the other thing is just refocusing on my health. That's been at the bottom of my priority list for quite some time now. And to get out and just run. I mean, I haven't gotten into the P90X like I had told myself I was going to do, but to just get out and run. And with every evolution, I can go in a little bit further and my stamina is a little bit higher. And
Right.
so long as I don't push it too hard and get, all the old man aches and pains in my ankles, proper warm-up's important. But what's funny is when I started this, I have that Samsung watch. And I would go for a run and I would come back and it would pop up and go, "That was a great walk." And I'm like,
what a slap to the face.
Are you serious? So last night, I think that was probably like my 8th or 9th run or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And my best one yet. I came in and I sat down and my phone or my watch buzzed and I looked down and it says, "That was a great run." I'm like, finally
it says run.
Finally, I'm there.
You made it.
All right. So I have achieved a new status.
Oh, that's funny. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So it's definitely been quite the improvement. It's been stressful several years, and to finally get to this point and go, you know what? Let's focus on health just a bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and you've been getting after it yourself.
Yeah. I just started with some simple just walking, and then I was like, I feel like I want to do a little extra, so I did like walking and like some super easy yoga things.
Right.
Like you can get pretty extreme into yoga, and that's not what I wanted. I basically didn't want to jump up and down
Right.
at the time. And then decided to kind of up it and do this like 7 day challenge. And so I finished that and I was feeling pretty proud of myself. And so now I'm doing, because we have that Beachbody on Demand app.
Right.
And so now I'm doing 28-day fix. And today will be day 11.
Right.
So pretty
That's
proud.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Feels good. Like it's almost like my reward at the end of the day, which that's probably going to have to change once it starts getting hotter into the summer months. But like, you know, our routine has been, we get up, we all have breakfast together. Me and Caroline do school. And then after 1:00, you know, Caroline is yours and I go in our room and do my schoolwork from 1 to 5. And then after 5, like me and Caroline put on our shoes and we go walk.
Yeah.
And then I do the 30-minute video and then it's clean up, dinner, get ready for bed.
Yeah. You guys saw something interesting on your walk the other day.
Yeah, it's getting warm enough now, and we came across a baby snake.
What kind?
I'm pretty sure it's a rattlesnake.
Yeah.
Like I'm not a snake connoisseur, and I don't care to be a snake connoisseur because I hate snakes.
Right.
Like, ugh. But like when I saw that, like the pit of my stomach was like, you know, that's a rattlesnake, Sarah. You know, that's a baby rattlesnake. So.
How long was it?
It was probably this long. So it wasn't really like baby. I would call that almost preteen.
So for those of you who are listening, because this is a podcast, Sarah,
that's probably what, 16 inch?
Yeah, about 16 or 18 inches. Yeah. So that's crazy.
Light brown, dark brown, kind of triangular head. And like I kept looking at the tail to like make sure I thought it was. And it had this tiny little sliver of a dark brown tip. So that's why I was like, I think that's the beginning of your shaker.
Your shaker?
Yeah.
Those shaker snakes.
That money maker.
Well, I went running through there last night and I was in such a good cadence, you know, where the grass is a little bit high.
Yeah.
And I was high knees, high knees.
Yeah. And like what's funny is since then, like I'm like, I'll keep walking around the house. But once we get there, Caroline instantly is like right next to me and or right behind me. And like we slow down a lot.
Yeah.
I'm like, we just shouldn't go back there.
Yeah. I've never really been, I mean, I've had encounters with snakes, but I've never been deathly afraid of them. And what's funny is like, you know, I grew up with my papaw being just, you know, his saying was the only good snake is a dead snake. He didn't care. He would kill anything he came across.
Right.
And, you know, just kind of an old school way of thinking. And I remember, you know, being a kid and, we used to live behind my grandparents and there was a workshop kind of halfway between the houses.
Oh.
And, and me and my dad were out on the porch and we heard this awfulest racket down in the workshop. I mean, tools crashing and doors slamming and beating and hollering and stuff. And all of a sudden here goes Papaw running out the door of the shop to his house. And me and my dad look at each other. I was probably about 6 or 7 or something like that. And here goes Papaw running back into the shop with a shotgun. And my dad goes, well, surely he's not going to kaboom.
Oh my gosh.
This
is the best.
He blew a hole in the floor trying to kill this snake. And so we went down there and he's like, Papaw, what's going on? He says, well, you know, you ever get that feeling when something's watching you? He says, I walked in the door and I turned around and right over the door was this big old rat snake looking me eye to eye about 8 inches away from me. And
those are long black ones, right? The rat snakes?
They can be like gray mottled kind of color. And so he grabbed the nearest 2x4 and started swinging and it fell down behind the workbench. And so he was sliding toolboxes around trying to find it. And whenever he'd find it, he'd take that 2x4 and slam it in there to kill
Smash it. Yeah.
But he was hitting it so hard that he was blowing boards off the back of the workshop.
Oh, that's right.
He literally tore that workshop apart trying to take out this snake. So yeah, there's all kinds of stories about Papaw and snakes. But personally, I don't know. Like I said, I've had plenty of encounters with them, but I'm not deathly afraid of them.
I've not really ever thought to be like super snake aware.
Yeah.
Even though we grew up on a farm, there would be times where every now and again, like when you were getting hay or whatever, you'd find those tiny little grass snakes in the hay bales,
Little gardener snakes.
I mean, they're dead, but like we had copperheads and things like that. And I don't know that I've ever seen one in person. I don't think.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then once we moved out here, you see all kinds of bullwhips all over the road.
Coach whips, yeah.
Coach whips, yeah. All over the road. And
king snakes
and rattlers, yeah.
Yeah. And out of all the poison snakes, I'd rather deal with a rattler than anything else, because generally they'll let you know.
Yeah.
They're irritated. We've seen some pretty good size ones over the years. But my dad almost got struck by a small one.
Yeah. See that, and that's my thing is when I saw that small one, I was like, oh, because they'll just keep going. They don't know better than to just that they only need to snap once.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened. Is my dad and I we were duck hunting, and this was in December, and it just had warmed up a little bit, and we were walking past this tall stand of grass, and I was behind him, and from out of nowhere came this head, and it was within 2 inches of his calf, and it struck about 3 times before we could even walk past it. It just boom, 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 and then it started rattling.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, so
it must have been cold.
It could have been that, but they also are saying that with all the wild pig problems and stuff, that the rattlers that their genetic instinct is to rattle first are getting eaten, and the ones that
haven't been trained or something,
and the ones that are genetically inclined to not rattle as much are surviving, and so those are the genes that are propagating, and so they're not rattling as much anymore.
That's not okay.
No, that's not okay. So shake what your mama gave you, rattlesnakes.
Please.
Let us know.
Help a sister out.
Oh, geez. So
why don't you read them our lovely intro?
Let's do that.
I'm ready.
Welcome, travelers, overlanders, weekend warriors, and fellow quarantinees to Campfire Confessions. We're your hosts, Kevin
and Sarah
of Lifestyle Overland, a husband and wife duo who travels North America and beyond with our daughter, Caroline. This podcast is about us, our travels, our stories, and lessons learned while living a lifestyle a bit outside the ordinary. So go ahead and pour your favorite beverage, pull up a camp chair, and join us as we stoke up this campfire for a bit of warmth and ambiance.
That's so sexy.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Much better. There we go. Yeah. She's roaring now. We want to take a moment to thank the sponsors of this show. That's right. These are the folks who keep the wind in our sails, our patrons. These fine folks are listeners, subscribers, and followers like yourself who keep the fuel coming and the adventure rolling. So thank you all who contribute to this adventure. So this podcast is going to be just a little bit controversial.
A little bit deeper than
what we've done in the past. And the thing is it's very timely.
Yeah.
But I guess I want to give a little bit of a disclaimer before we really get into it is we don't want to come across insensitive.
Right.
To the situation, to what's going on, and the impact that this COVID-19 is having to us worldwide, and here to our listeners. So, but I also want to warn you that while it is a timely discussion, it can be hard to swallow for some folks. And so we just want to say that this is just us having a discussion about our experiences,
right,
and lessons that we've learned. And I think that it could be beneficial for a lot of people. The big thing that could come out of this is that it could be the lifestyle change that you need.
Right. That you might have already been looking for.
Exactly.
And this is a time and opportunity for you to really actually mull it over, consider it, visualize it.
Right. This could be a pivot point for someone who has had their eyes open. Maybe you've lost your job. Maybe, you're in a terrible financial situation now. Maybe you've been working so hard to get to a point to where you could adventure more, and now you're wondering how in the world is that going to happen, kind of thing. So we just kind of want to hit that whole situation on the head, and this dovetails nicely into a question that we get very frequently, and that is, how do we do this? How do we do this full time? The YouTube thing and the travel thing and stuff like that.
Right.
And this might be your opportunity to put yourself on a path to adventure more in the future.
Right.
If there was to be one successful outcome for anyone listening to this podcast, I think it would be at the end, they walk away having the permission to define their own life expectations.
Yeah, I would agree.
So yeah, let's just dive into this.
Let's do it.
So if the title of this podcast hasn't given it away yet, we're talking about minimalism.
Yes.
And just as I said that word, you probably conjured up something in your mind that you think minimalism is all about. The word itself lends to thinking that, there's a stark white room with one chair, one lamp, one book. Like,
yeah,
there's a lot of Instagram worthy photos and stuff that
are hashtagged
that are hashtagged to that perception. But we feel that it's probably best called intentionalism. Because at the core of it, it's not about depriving yourself.
Right.
It's not about self-abasement or, look at me, how little I'm living with. It's about refocusing the majority of your funds and your time to your passions and your attention to the things that you truly enjoy. And really, at its core, it's about trading in some social expectations
that we've grown up with or have instilled in us or assumed
or we see on Instagram or social media or our friends and neighbors and family living these particular lifestyles. And maybe even subconsciously, we've created a measuring stick as to what life is supposed to look like, and the things that you're supposed to have, and if you have this, then you've made it, or you're successful, kind of thing. And so that's really what it comes down to, is kind of breaking that apart and calling each expectation for what it is,
right,
and determining if that's truly something that you have assigned to yourself with the right motivation.
Right.
So the road to get to this point, for me personally, took a long time. Like my background, I remember my first job was I started mowing yards. There was some condominiums up the road from where I was living, and so I would mow those things once, sometimes twice a week. And I mean, it was a good 2.5 hour, 3 hour evolution. Just push mowing and weed eating and stuff like that, and for $40. And that was the first time where I was making my own income. And, my family, I would say we were middle class, like just cookie cutter middle class. My dad was a lineman for the utility. He worked a ton of hours, especially when, the weather was bad.
Right.
Very, very dangerous job for decent money. Not anything crazy. We never wanted for a need. If that makes sense. Like, we always had clothes on our backs. We always had food. We did not have new cars.
Right. But you had a nice home.
Well, we had a nice home because my dad built it himself.
Oh, that's right.
My dad would go to work for 8 to 10 hours, and then he would work from like 5 in the afternoon, sometimes until midnight, 1 o'clock, building this house with his own hands, because his background, he was a carpenter before he became a lineman. And so, from an early age, I was taught both from my dad and my granddad that if you wanted something, you had to work for it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Me too.
I mean, the only time I got toys was
birthday and Christmas.
That's it.
Yep.
And honestly, I did have grandparents that like to spoil me every now and then, so I would coerce them into buying me a Lego from time to time.
Or baseball cards.
Oh yeah, I still got all.
I've heard those stories.
I've still got all those baseball cards. It wasn't. We weren't living high on the hog. It was. We gardened. A lot of the food we raised ourselves. You
had a stay-at-home mom.
My mom,
for a majority of the time.
Yeah, my mom. She was a stay-at-home mom. She homeschooled 5 of us kids. And so, yeah, there was not a lot to go around. And so if I wanted something outside the ordinary,
right,
I had to go and work for it. And so, one lawn turned into a few more yards. And before you knew it, I was making some pretty good money as a 14-year-old.
Yeah.
And it's funny how those first experiences really start to develop your mindset. What was interesting is I was probably the weird kid that saved more money than most kids would.
Right.
But I definitely quickly fell into the trap that with the more that I made, the more that I spent.
Okay.
Exponentially, right? And so that I can remember that from early on. And so from there, I began wiring houses with my dad part-time and kind of created our own little business there for a bit, and then decided, hey, the residential side of stuff is cool, but why don't I expand my knowledge of the electrical industry? And so I went and joined the IBEW. It's International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, the union, and served my 5-year apprenticeship in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And that was one heck of an experience, because I don't know if you're familiar with Oak Ridge, Tennessee, but some of the facilities and stuff that are in that area have some very interesting government projects and stuff that go on inside there. So I got to see a lot of very interesting things. I should say work on a lot of very interesting projects and things like that. So I spent 5 years in that apprenticeship program, and turns out I really enjoyed it. And like a couple weeks after I topped out or became a journeyman wireman, they made me foreman over one of the projects.
I remember.
And we
were married.
We had only been married 3 months at that point.
Yes.
Yeah. And so that was really exciting. A little bit of a bump in pay at that point, and working crazy hours again. 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, sometimes on night shift. I mean, it was pretty brutal at that point. But they called me in the office and they said, "Would you like to become an estimator? Would you like to start, working on these projects that we have coming up and put together the bids and things like that?" And I was like, absolutely. I wanted to learn all that I possibly could. And within just a few months of doing that, I went from estimating the projects to, once we won the bids, hey, would you like to manage this project? So then I was doing the procurement, and I was going out and checking on them. And before you knew it, I was a project manager. And so it was a lot of hard work. And I wouldn't say that it wasn't without a few strokes of luck to get in those positions and stuff.
Right.
But,
but you were open to the possibilities of that.
Right.
Like sometimes some people could be presented this option and they're like, oh, well, I don't know if I'm ready for that yet.
Sure.
Like sometimes some people don't want to learn new things,
sure,
or they don't think that they'd be worth it.
Yeah.
So I think having the attitude of, yeah, sure, I'll give it a try, really can propel people into forward motion.
Well, and I think that, coming at it from the ground up, I had a confidence, from a nut and bolt standpoint all the way up to, how to deal with people and things like that. And so, it wasn't necessarily false confidence. It was something that I knew inside and out. And so it was just looking at it from a different perspective at that point. So,
right.
So yeah, that's how I, quickly went up the chain and became a project manager. But the catch was the company that I was working for, after I had proven myself and I'd been in there for over a year, was still paying me foreman wages.
Yep.
After, a few promises that were made and broken, and I quickly found out, might be being taken advantage here.
Yeah.
And so I heard rumors of a job in New Mexico. And they were, and that was the thing, is like, we'd always lived in East Tennessee.
Yep.
Matter of fact,
never
same
left.
Small city. My parents, their parents, their parents' parents, like, always lived in this small town in East Tennessee. So it wasn't really even on the radar to move
to New Mexico.
To New Mexico, much less even just a few hours down the road.
I had to look on a map where exactly New Mexico was.
Is that in the United States?
My grandmother kept saying Mexico.
I'm
like,
I know.
No.
Yeah, a lot of people thought we were south of the border.
No.
Yeah, it's the new part of Mexico.
The new part.
Yeah. And so this opportunity came up in New Mexico, and I'll never forget. It was me and my good friend Jason Husky. We went through the apprenticeship together. We sat side by side through 5 years of school together. We'd worked on a lot of the same jobs together, and we were talking about it. And we were like, why don't we just do it?
Because he's a good old East Tennessee boy, too.
And he looks at me, and I look at him. I was like, let's go. And so we're like, well, all right then. And so from that point, we determined we were going to go to New Mexico. Now, it wasn't just an open door. We had to.
You had a lot of hoops to jump through.
There was a lot of hoops to jump through. We had to pass the New Mexico journeyman wireman test, which apparently, from what we understood, people in the state passed it a lot easier than those who were coming from out of state. There might have been some politics involved there. And so we basically had to study our butts off for several weeks to get ready for that exam. And we were the only two to pass it. So then it's like, okay, you've got your license, you're locked in, this is going to happen. Well, when I was headed out there, I was supposed to be going out just as a foreman. And then they called me up and they said, well, you know any project managers that be interested in going out there? And I go, yep.
That's me. Here's my resume.
Here's my resume. So within a real short amount of time, like it just expanded from there. The wait to get out there was frustrating, as with, a lot of these big contracts and stuff are concerned. And this is a bit of a rabbit trail, but it's it's kind of indicative of the story. When I quit my job at the previous company and went to be a project manager in preparation for New Mexico at the other company, there was a bit of a gap in time, and so they sent me out on a job. And so I get out there, and they're installing controls in these massive water towers. I think they were, if I remember right, they were 240 or 260 feet tall, something like that. And they put me on the lightning protection. And so, I
don't think I remember this.
Oh yeah. And I was never afraid of heights, especially as I got older, because I was usually working when I was in the heights. And so I was distracted. And I'd been in a 125-foot boom lift before inside a high bay. I don't think they make them much bigger than that. And so I was pretty experienced with heights. Well, on these water towers, the only way that you could install the lightning protection alongside of them was to get in this basket that basically had a winch mounted inside. It's called a spider basket. And it was tied to the top of the water tower. And you press a button and it goes, and it takes you up the water tower. And so I'd been out there. It was wintertime. I was installing this lightning protection going, boy, did I make the wrong move?
Yeah.
I sure hope this New Mexico thing pans out sooner than later, And so I'm up there, and I'm about 200 feet in the air, and it's lunchtime. And so I went to hit the button and go down. And it goes, click, 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 click. And I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me. The thing just quits. And so I'm looking down, and the wind had been picking up. That was the other reason why I was coming down as well. Everybody's inside because it's cold. And so I'm sitting there waiting, and finally I get my cell phone out, and I call my foreman. And I was like, hey.
I'm stuck.
I'm just hanging out up here. And come to find out, they didn't have a backup. They didn't have a backup spider basket. They didn't have a lift. They didn't have anything to get me down. And so I ended up having to just sit up there for about 5 hours while they went around the Knoxville area trying to find another spider basket to get it out there and get it tied to the water tower. And then by this time, the wind's blowing about 30 miles an hour, and I'm swinging back and forth on the side of this freaking water tower in this government facility. Oh, yeah.
I don't remember this at all.
Maybe I didn't tell you the story.
You may have not.
Yeah, so anyhow, they finally got up there, and here we are swinging back and forth, and the baskets are banging together. And so I have to unclip. So I unclip my lanyard, and we grab the baskets together, and I scramble in just as fast as I can. And I click in my lanyard, and we come down. But when I got on the ground, the project... I would
have been like, I quit.
When I got on the ground, the general manager was there, because obviously it was kind of a safety issue for the company, right?
You think?
So I get on the ground, I go, I'm ready to go to New Mexico right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it eventually happened, and we made our way to New Mexico, and here we were. We've been married, what, a year and a half?
Uh-huh.
So newlyweds.
Yep.
We had us a 1,400 square foot home that we had bought in
when we first got married.
Yeah, in Knoxville. Yeah, we were kind of on our way to that typical trajectory.
Typical life, yeah.
Not and basically paycheck to paycheck at that point.
Because I was still in college.
You were, yeah. Things were pretty tight, but New Mexico really made a big difference when we got out here. And so I came out here as a project manager on that job, and when that wrapped up, I went to work for the facility that we built, basically, as a work planner, and then again as a field engineer under another contract. And so, spent a lot of time out here building this facility and made good money at it. I mean, I'm not going to lie, but the thing is, those same positions in areas that were desirable to live in would pay probably less than half what they were paying to get people to come to this remote location in New Mexico where there were no amenities and rent was unbelievably high. Cost of living was unbelievably high because of the oil field and stuff like that. And so it had its trade-offs.
It did.
We made some pretty big sacrifices to leave family and friends and stuff to come out here.
And start over, yeah.
But, that mindset kind of continued, though. The more that we made, the more that we spent, the more we extended ourselves and congratulated ourselves for the advancements at that point. I mean, at one point I had we bought a 2010 Camaro SS.
It literally on a whim.
Yeah, it was pretty much a whim.
Because let's let everyone know that you're a habitual looker. You're always
shopper,
looking.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like shopping implies purchasing. So
window shopping, Craigslist surfing.
Yes.
Yeah.
You were always looking.
That's right.
Yeah.
No doubt.
And you saw that and you're like, Sarah, let's go look at it after work today. And I'm like, okay.
Although, to be fair, we got a screaming deal on it.
We got a screaming deal on it.
Because it'd been on the lot for like 8 months. Nobody wanted it because it was a 6-speed stick.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really hate that we sold that thing, to be honest with you.
Yeah, but you needed a truck.
Yeah.
Because you lost the company truck.
Yeah, when I moved jobs, I lost the company truck. So, when we made the decision to come to New Mexico.
Right.
Because the idea was that we would come out for this much higher paycheck for a short amount of time.
Right.
And just pack it away and save it. And then we could come back to Tennessee and be in a much better position financially.
Yeah.
So that we weren't in such a paycheck to paycheck situation. But we kind of got caught up in this whirlwind and contracts got extended and other opportunities came up. And so it was very difficult to leave that. And we created an amazing community of friends that we were working with and people that we went to church with and things like that. And so we had kind of created our own little community. And so we were comfortable. And
very comfortable.
The logic was, as long as we could continue to make money, let's just stick with it and let's just keep going. But we continued to creep, and our footprint continued to creep. And before long, we had 2 car payments, and we had we were paying really high rent, and so we justified, well, let's go buy a house so we're not throwing money away. And so we went and bought a really nice house.
Yeah.
And put money into that. And before you knew it, even though when we were in Tennessee and we were, pretty happy and living paycheck to paycheck, but we had all the things we thought we needed. Yeah. We got to New Mexico and slipped right back into that on a much grander scale.
Right. We weren't saving like we had intended to. And when we came out, we were like, okay, we're going to work for 6 months, save like crazy, and go back. But then we were like, hey, we have money to spend now. Yeah. And we enjoyed that feeling.
We did. And we justified it. And we said, well, we're probably never going to make this kind of money ever again. Let's enjoy ourselves. Yeah. And so we did. We just partied hard with that money. Yeah. And it continued to creep. Well, the problem is the stress never got any less. The stress got more.
Yeah, with the more that we owned.
Because with the more...
Going from renting to owning, you now have to mow your own yard. You now have to fix that own leaky faucet.
Exactly. And we were also living in a very volatile real estate market because of the oil field.
Right.
And so there was always in the back of your mind, oh goodness, because we'd heard horror stories of this area when the oil bust would come, and people would sell houses for pennies on the dollar and stuff like that. And so we knew we were running a bit of a high risk.
But it's what we wanted at the time.
It is. It is. And it wasn't without some logic. Like, we bought a nice house with the intention that if we needed to sell it, it would be at the top of someone's list.
Right.
As opposed to buying an extremely cheap house that would probably sit on the market longer and potentially lose more money if we needed to jettison it.
Right.
And so it wasn't it wasn't reckless, but it was risky.
Yeah.
And it was way more than we needed.
Yes.
And so I go through this background to kind of paint this picture for you of how easy it is to start out with the best of intentions, and then with each advancement, creep your lifestyle and your budget to the point where it's always stretched tight. And if we had played a little bit different tune, we would have been in a much different situation. So here's what happened next.
Right.
The oil field crashed.
It started to.
And
we saw
to.
it.
Yeah.
Because we got to see it before the rest of the country did, because we were in the middle of it.
So in New Mexico, if you're driving around Hobbs, New Mexico area, it's basically West Texas. It's oil field country. Just all kinds of laydown yards, all kinds of oil field truck traffic. Like, you feel the buzz.
Yes.
It's like being in New York City. You feel the buzz of the people and the energy and stuff that's going on. And it was almost overnight.
Yeah.
Someone flipped a switch.
Yeah.
And you started seeing businesses going up for sale. You started seeing trucks getting parked at the laydown yards.
Yep.
You started seeing less and less traffic on the road. And I went, it's time to go.
Well, and we also had friends whose spouses worked in the oil field.
Right.
And were telling us, "Oop, here we go again.
Yeah.
Everybody buckle up."
Yeah.
But that was their cultural norm out here. But for us, we're like, oh, hang
exactly.
on.
And so, I quickly said, all right, it's time to sell the house. I still had about, what was it?
7 or 8 months.
Yeah, just a few months left on my contract.
Yeah.
And so we decided, well, shoot, let's sell this thing. Let's rent a place, finish the contract.
And then we'll
try and save and scrimp and save this last little hurrah. And then head back to Tennessee and whatever.
Yeah.
And so put the house up for sale on Facebook.
We sold it ourselves.
Sold it within 30 days.
Yep.
Sold it ourselves. And basically broke even. Came out smelling like a rose for this. What we felt, was for the situation.
Right.
And so the next thing was, okay, where are we going to stay while we finish out this short little contract? So at this point, we've got, 2-year-old Caroline?
She wasn't 2 quite yet.
Oh, yeah. She was probably only
1.5
Yep.
ish. Yeah.
And so at that point, we were trying to decide where we were going to live.
Yeah. And I was like, well, we need in my mind, I was still like trying to maintain what I was giving up, because I'll be honest, I loved that house.
Yeah.
And there are times where I still kind of miss that house. So I was like, okay, well, we need a yard. She needs her own room. We still should have a room so that if family wants to come and visit us before we move, I was still trying to keep up with what was my social norm.
Yeah. We were definitely the Joneses at that point.
We were, yeah.
We had the 2,000 square foot home. We had the granite countertops. We had 2 new vehicles.
Yep.
We had the garage. I mean,
the dog, the cute kid,
the big backyard.
Yeah.
And eating steak a couple times a week.
Yep.
No joke. I mean, like,
oh, yeah.
we were
comfortable.
We were very comfortable at that point. But again, the stress and the underlying risk was so high that it wasn't a good trade-off necessarily.
Right.
So,
because we didn't know what we were going to do next.
Exactly.
We hadn't decided if we wanted to go back to Tennessee. We hadn't talked about if we were going to stay there and you were going to try and transition somewhere else. But if the oil field was going down, that's really the only other job you could have switched to.
Sure.
So we were like, oh, well, we're going to have to go to Tennessee, or we're going to have to go somewhere else.
Yeah. So I was talking to my coworker about the situation. And I said, hey, I'm selling my house. I'm getting out of this. I don't want to get stuck, like these horror stories that I've heard. And have you heard of any good places to rent? And he goes, well, I've got a fifth wheel camper that we're not using. You guys want to borrow it for a few months? And I just kind of laughed because I already knew Sarah's opinion of camper life.
Yeah.
And
I was never going to live in a home with wheels.
That was her words exactly. Oh, I mean, for the whole time we were married, like that was
I don't know why
prerequisite.
I knew he had these inklings.
And so I just kind of laughed and I said, well, hey, we're going to dinner this Friday night. Why don't you bring it up and see what Sarah says?
Because I was still because rent was really high. For a 2-bedroom, it was what? $1,500?
For a 14? No, for a 2-bedroom, it was $1,500 a month without utilities.
Without utilities.
Yeah.
And then a 3-bedroom was $1,750.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So in my mind, I was like, it's still going to be worth it. I still need to have a nice home. Like, I want to have my friends over. Caroline needs these things.
Right.
Right. So we go out to dinner.
Yeah.
And we're all talking. And our
good friend Wayne,
says, well, why don't you guys take our camper? You know that it's better for them to be constantly used rather than sitting empty. And it's just sitting empty right now. I looked him square in the face and I said, no, sir.
I think you used a different word, but
I did. But I looked at Kevin and he kind of laughed and I was like, you knew this was coming. You guys have talked about this. He's like, well, yeah, you really ought to consider it. And Wayne and his family, he has 3 kids. And at one point in time, they all lived in that camper.
Yep.
For multiple years.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I have one tiny little kid. I ain't even doing that.
Right.
No. I'm not living in a house with wheels. You will always have me on a permanent foundation.
Yeah. Well, and then his wife, basically shared her experiences with you at that point.
Yeah. And she's like, yeah, it has its troubles and its hard things. She's like, but it was totally worth it in the long run. And I'm like, I don't care. That is not what I'm going to do.
Yeah. So
I am not telling my friends that I'm living in a 5th-wheel camper.
Yeah. So I knew what the conversation was, but I knew someone else had to bring the subject up with you at least.
Yeah.
To see how you would respond. And
because in our history of life, if someone else brings it up, it happens. When we talk to someone else or someone else says something that, hey, well, why don't you do this thing? It happens.
For example,
Wayne, hey, why don't you guys live in my camper?
Right.
If you had just said it, I would have fought you and we would have ended up paying a crap ton of rent. And then when Jason, Swell Runner, said, well, why don't you make Lifestyle Overland your full-time business?
Right.
The second he said that, I was like, oh, no, that's going to happen now.
Right. That's interesting.
It's true.
Yeah. So when we left that dinner, what was your mindset? I don't think we really talked much about it because I knew I wasn't going to push you into it. It had to be like your own decision. Yeah.
I can be stubborn, but I'm also a pragmatist. I'm very practical.
Right.
Like sometimes almost a little bit to a fault. And so when at one point in time, we were packing, moving things out into our storage unit, we kept talking about, well, where are we going to go? Where are we going to go? And we kept talking about the money. And I was like, I can't pay this much rent. I can't let us pay this much rent.
Right.
When we had a 5th wheel offered to us for free. And another friend say, come park it on my property and you can live there rent free.
Right.
Just mow the yard and haul off my trash.
Yeah, and pay for electricity.
Right. So I was like, you know what? And my motto had been, since we had moved from Tennessee to New Mexico, was I can do anything for a little while.
Sure.
Because when we had moved, we had agreed we were only moving for 6 months.
That's right.
7 years later. Now I can't imagine moving back to Tennessee. Anyway, so I was like, all right, Sarah, you can live tiny and in a 5th-wheel camper for a little while. And your contract only had 6 more months.
Yeah, maybe less than that.
Yeah. So I was like, all right, I can do anything for 6 months. Really, truthfully, you can.
Yeah,
you can do anything for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So after talking for a while, I was like, okay, tell him we'll do it. And you were always pretty confident, not confident, but you were always very good to say, if it doesn't work for us, Sarah, we will move into something else.
Absolutely. Well,
like, it wasn't like we had to make it work no matter what, because financially we could have afforded, but we wouldn't have saved.
Yeah, and we would have gone back to Tennessee with far less than we had intentionally planned or originally planned. And so you came to me and you said, hey, I think we need to do this.
Yeah.
Just for a little while. And I said, okay, you by yourself go up to Wayne and Missy's house and you look at that thing by yourself and make your decision on whether or not you can live in it, because you're going to be the one that's there. I mean, you were
because I was stay-at-home mom,
so you're going to have to make sure that you're going to be able to stay in this confined space with Caroline at that point.
Mm-hmm.
At what point did you decide, okay, maybe this won't be so bad?
Well, I did go up there by myself, and I took a ton of pictures and showed videos, and I think I even called my mom and was like, did you see all the pictures that I sent? And, she was looking at it. She's like, Caroline is so small. You can put her crib right there in the living room. You guys will be up in your room. Like, yeah, some things will be different. You can't go snacking through the fridge or the kitchen because Caroline's right there.
Right.
She's like, but you can do anything for a little while. Remember your motto. And I was like, okay, yeah. If I think I felt like if other people believed I could actually do it, then I think I felt more confident in my decision, So, I think it was just at the point where I start like, I'm a visual person. And so, you telling me what it looked like, or even kind of looking at pictures, I couldn't grasp what spatially that felt like.
Right.
And so I do remember, being a little concerned about like up in the bedroom, how the ceilings were so low.
Sure.
I was like, I can't even stretch my arms over my head.
Right.
And at the time I was working out pretty intensely. So I was like, if Caroline was napping down in her room, like there's no way I could even work out up here. There were some things, but at the same time, it was just one of those things where I was like, I can do anything for a little while.
Right.
I can do anything for a little while. So we also had told each other that after this was done, we would buy another house.
Right.
So I was like, I can live tiny for 6 months, knowing my stuff is in storage, and I'm going to get a pretty house again.
And little did we know, that was a step off to the deep end just a bit.
Yes. Right.
Yeah. So, the whole idea behind this is that leading up to this minimalist lifestyle, it was completely unintentional.
Yeah.
We were doing this temporarily,
mm-hmm.
and then we stepped into it, and then we found out, hey, wow, okay, this isn't so bad.
This isn't as bad.
It's not as bad as we thought it would be.
I mean, I could clean the entire camper in 30 minutes, and that literally means like wiping down the walls, you guys.
Oh, yeah.
Like I could vacuum the entire place from one outlet.
Right.
Like Zeke was out, the dog was outside at the time,
mm-hmm.
like you had made a nice little fenced in area. So even, me and Caroline could go out and play in the little yard that we had.
Put out the little Lowe's AstroTurf rolls.
Yeah. And we had a little kiddie
spot.
Pool. And
right.
Yeah. I mean, we made it comfortable and home.
Yeah. We were the people at that point we made fun of in Tennessee.
Yes.
And it was really an eye-opening thing at that point.
Mm-hmm.
We always made jokes about trailer parks in Tennessee and all that kind of stuff. And we realized that it's not that bad. It's not that bad. Because what we realized at that point was, wow, look at how much we're not spending on utilities
mm-hmm.
and rent and all these other things.
How much time I was spending cleaning
a
giant house.
And not having to mow the yard.
That was only for 3 people.
Exactly. And so now the stress level of not having a mortgage to make sure you're covering and all this other stuff was reduced significantly.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess you could make the argument that this next step was a bit of lifestyle creep in a way. But what we said was, hey, if we have these extra funds, why don't we invest in this camping stuff that we've been doing?
Mm-hmm.
Get out of this tiny enclosure from time to time. Go out and have some fun. and do it in a super comfortable way. And so, we had been looking at the turtleback trailers for a while at that point, and we were like, hey, and what really got it was when Turtleback started offering financing. So we didn't have to like pay a big old chunk down. And it was like, why don't we do this and be intentional about our family time and be intentional about getting out and having these adventures? If we have the trailer and everything's loaded, we're not pulling boxes and
because I think that was one of my arguments too. Is I was like, dude, we can't keep camping with this tiny camper, because by the time I got totes out and was packing totes up and everything, it filled up the entire place, and there's nowhere for Caroline to play. And then she was pulling stuff out of the boxes, and
we look like the Clampets with everything on the roof of the 4Runner. And then I think probably the turning point was when I forgot the air mattress the one night.
Yeah, for Caroline's birthday camp out weekend.
And so that's definitely when we get the ideas flowing to say, well,
with a rooftop tent, you can't forget the mattress.
why don't we shift things a bit and mix things up? If we've got 5 or 6 months left here in New Mexico, and go and just adventure and have some incredible times. And that was when I was actually planning the Enchanted Rockies Trail. I was mapping all that stuff out to go and do these things. And so we unintentionally made this pivot, and we bought the Turtleback trailer. And we started going, and it was like every other weekend.
It was.
If not more than that.
Right.
And it was so easy. It was so convenient. It was so comfortable. It literally started changing our lives. Well, at that point, my contract got extended again. Yeah. For like 12 months. Yep. I think that's when I moved over to field engineer. And
but we seriously considered not taking it.
Sure.
Remember? We were like, no, we said we were only going to do this for 6 more months, and then we were going to move on to the next thing. Yeah. And so we really went back and forth on that.
Well, we really did, because, it was high stress, right, for sure. And sometimes a lot of hours and stuff like that. And, we talked about trying to reduce some of the stress in our life and things like that. But again, the money was good.
The money was good.
And it was familiar.
It was familiar. This is where Caroline was born. This is where we considered home. This is where our church was. So it was like, yeah, I want to stay 1 more year.
Right. We can do anything for 1 more year.
Well, but then the conversation came up. Do we keep staying in this? Do we buy our own? Or do we go and rent something?
I think we were headed down the road of renting something once the contract started coming up. But then we were like, no, wait a minute. We decided that if we live below our means, we'll have this excess, and not that we should use all of it, but we have this excess to go and do something that we really enjoy together. And it was literally like within the next day, someone I was working with who was leaving the job, he was unable to sell his camper. And I think he was leaving like in 2 days. Yeah. And I said, all right, Charlie, what do you want for this thing? And so I went and looked at it, and it was a nice unit. It was decently kept. And he gave me a lowball offer because he was going to pay, I think, like $2,000 just to get it moved back, because he'd already sold his truck and everything. Yeah. And so we made just a swinging deal. And so got him a check. He moved back to Alabama, and we took that thing and we parked it at our friend Billy and Trina's house so that we could start, renovating it before we moved into it.
Well, we had looked at new ones, because I was like, I want something that looks nicer and newer and hipper and chicer if we're going to keep living small. Right. Remember? Yeah. And so you're like, well, what if we bought his and then renovated ourselves? Right. Like put in new floors, paint, yada, yada, yada.
And we would be in it for a quarter of what we would spend for a new one.
For a new one.
For a good new one.
Right.
Yeah. So, we basically said, well, shoot, let's get into this thing for next to nothing, put a little bit into it, and make it our own. And so we did. And oh my gosh, like on paper, you go, well, I'm saving so much money. Then you look at how many hours you put into it, and you're like, oh my gosh. Yeah. How much did I really pay? Yeah. But anyhow, that was our decision, and that's how we got into the camper
life.
But at that point, when it was our own, it was something we had built ourselves, we'd renovated ourselves, and it was laid out the way that we wanted it. Like, that was home.
Yeah. It sure was.
And we were just as happy as we could be living in that thing. And that's really when things started to shift.
That we were like, we actually like this. We can do this.
Exactly. And we started looking at life a little bit
Well, and we
differently.
realized we weren't going back to the storage unit to get anything.
Well, yeah, that's the other side of it is, people say, how can you move from a house into a small 300 square foot RV? Like how it blows your mind. And it used to blow my mind.
Oh, yeah.
Until we actually did it. And all that excess went into a storage container, 40-foot storage container. And so what we found was that we rarely ever went to the storage unit. Like we weren't missing anything. We had our necessities and that was it. And if we wanted to do something fun, we were out. We were gone. We were hitting the trails. We were camping. We were
hanging out with friends
And what we had done previously was when we had a nice house, we found we were laying on the couch and we were watching sports and we were having cookouts and we weren't going anywhere. And that's fine if that's what you enjoy. And we enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But when you have that nice environment, it makes it harder to feel motivated to go sleep in a tent.
Yeah.
But when you're inside a small enclosure, the weekend comes, it's like, yeah, let's
get out.
Let's go. So in its own way, it's motivating you to
let's go vacation,
to move and get out and do some stuff. So that's how we unintentionally slid into this minimalist lifestyle. And over the course of time, that storage unit had less and less and less in it as we just yard sold it and got rid of it. And we're actually at the point right now where we need to do it again. So that's how we got to this point in our lives of realizing we didn't need all that stuff. And all of that lifestyle creep. If I make this much money, then I need to have this nicer car. And if I make this much money, I need to have this bigger house. And we said, no, we don't have to do that.
Right.
What do we really want to do? What do we really want to enjoy? We want to get outside. We want to go and travel. We want to see the world, have these experiences. And so once we started living well below our means, it opened up all these doors of opportunity. And it was completely accidental. Sarah and I were joking last night that it was really the first time we had read any articles on being minimalist.
It really had.
It's kind of like there's a lot of people that we talk to who say, yeah, I was overlanding before I even knew what it was. Well, we were minimalist before we even knew what it was.
Yeah. Like I just kept calling it downsizing.
Right.
Oh, we were just downsizing.
Yeah.
And I think I had already kind of had this idea that for as small as minimalist as you want to call this, that when I bought a new piece of clothing and I put it in my closet, I took an old piece of clothing out and donated it. Like I wasn't going to just keep racks on racks of things that I wasn't wearing.
Yeah.
What was the point, So even just tiny things like that are tiny steps towards what you can call a minimalist lifestyle.
Right. And it wasn't just the financial side of things that brought us to this decision, this lifestyle change. Kind of as all this was going on with, the job contract and stuff coming to a close and selling the home and things like that, over the course of that 1 or 2 year period, I lost both my granddads to cancer. And I was very close to both of them. My one granddad, the story about the snake.
Yeah.
We literally spent every day together for about 20 years. Every day together, working on the farm, and that was the hardest loss I had ever experienced. And so, it definitely makes you reflect on life. And I was thinking about how they impacted my life by spending time with me, and I looked at how little time I was spending with Caroline, and definitely got the wheels going about, well, what's the most important thing in life? And, here's 2 granddads who worked so hard their whole lives. And when they got to that point where they could have went and traveled or done all these things that they had kind of talked about doing for years, it got interrupted by cancer, and it just stopped. So, we started having these conversations of what are we going to look back on? If we're laying on our deathbed, are we going to say, boy, I'm so glad that we bought that 2,000 square foot home, and boy, weren't those granite countertops amazing? Or remember that brand new GMC Sierra that we got? Like, that's not the things that you talk about when you pass away.
Right.
Remember all those hours that I spent at the office? That was incredible. No, it's not going to be that. It's going to be those experiences that you had with the ones that you love. And then not long after losing, both of our granddads, we were also dealing with another very personal loss as well.
Yeah, we had decided that we were going to grow our little family, and we had 2 miscarriages. So I think the first one was a surprise and disappointing because our pregnancy with Caroline was a dream. And then the second one, I think, was kind of a gut punch. Yeah. Like, how can this happen again? Kind of deal. And so I think, we were kind of starting to evaluate, if this is our family, what are we going to do with our family? Right. What are we going to do with Caroline and you and me? And what were we going to have and have an experience wise as well? So I think all of those things caused a lot of introspective very, very quickly, because this was all within a year and a half of each other. Right. Everything was stacked on top of each other. So I think it definitely made me evaluate, okay, like, what does my motherhood look like? How do I want to spend my time with you and with Caroline, and how, where were we going to do that too? So,
yeah. And so with all of these emotional gut punches that we'd been through, mm-hmm. and having come out of the stress of having an expensive home and bills and stuff like that, and all this reevaluation that, again, it was unintentional, mm-hmm. but it was also one of the biggest blessings of our life, was to look back at what we were focused on and say that we want to be more intentional, mm-hmm. about where we go from here.
Right.
And not continue to pursue these things that are just kind of the social norms.
Right.
We wanted to go and experience something different.
Yeah.
And so I just want to stop at this point and say, if you're listening to this and if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling guilty, if you're feeling like, well, how do I go about doing this as well? Like, this is just our story.
Right.
This isn't us saying everyone needs to go through this or everyone needs to sell everything and travel. We're not saying that. Mm-mm. This is just the path that our life has taken us along.
Right.
And it's been an incredible one. It's been
challenging,
extremely hard to get to this point. But we also want to say that you need to consider where you're headed in your life right now and decide if that's truly what you desire. Mm-hmm. And be intentional about your next steps. And the reason I think this discussion is so poignant is just in this time right now, we're talking to a lot of different ranges of people and incomes, yeah. and backgrounds, and now, you might be dealing with a whole new struggle. Mm-hmm. This is all to say that through our darkest time in our life, with the losses that we experienced and the transitions that we made, the other side of that turned out to be absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
And it was worth the struggle and the pain to get through that, to go and have the experiences that we've had and to see the things that we have seen. And so I just want to be encouraging through this whole story. No matter what you're going through, it's going to get better.
Yeah.
It's going to get better. You just have to stay after it. And so, this all comes back around to this question that we get constantly is, how do we afford this lifestyle? And we're old-fashioned in that we're not going to go into detail and say, oh, we make X amount of money doing this and X amount of money doing that. The message here is that you have to be intentional, mm-hmm. about your passion and your pursuit. And so the first step in doing that is minimizing your expenses.
Right.
And then maximizing your income where you can.
Right.
The fundamental background of minimalism, per se, is maximizing your passion. And that's going to take sacrifice and trade-off to pursue things that you're interested in.
Exactly. And I think it's also you need to have a clear idea or picture of what your interest is or your passion is or what your core value is, mm-hmm. before you ever start initially doing this.
Right.
And then you can start taking the practical steps towards whether that be like financial freedom or learning a new skill set to be able to, make more money or something like that,
Right. So it's really not about becoming a minimalist as much as it is about becoming an intentionalist.
Yeah.
Like, this is what I want to work towards. And so it's not going to be easy. You're going to have to make sacrifices. There's going to be trade-offs. But in the end, if that's what you're truly passionate about, you're going to be so much more satisfied with your life, living those things out that you so desire.
Yeah.
So you invest in your experiences by reducing your expenses. So if you're living in a 4-bedroom house and there's only 2 of you,
consider downsizing.
Exactly. I've had a lot of people make the assumption that we're just filthy stinking rich because they look at our trailer and they look at our rig and they're like, oh my gosh, how do you afford all of this? And then you're like, what do you live in? Oh, I've got a 2,500 square foot house. I've got a, 2,500 Dodge Cummins, blah, blah, blah. Like, how do you afford to go and do all of this? And it's the what versus the end.
Right.
So what do you have? Most people assume you have a house, 1 or 2 car payments, all of these other things. And so when they see what we're doing, they think it's an and. They think it's in addition to all of those typical expenses that people live with nowadays. And that's not the case.
Right.
That is our only expenses. And so it's taken years to get to the point to where that's where we are from a financial standpoint and from just our specific goals.
Like, one thing I can't help but think about right now all of a sudden is how, 10 years ago, our goal was that we wanted to own. We wanted to own land.
Yeah.
We wanted to own our home. We wanted to have our cars paid off and, all of these things. We wanted to own it. And now we're like, what can we get rid of? What do we not want to really own?
Yeah.
Eventually we'll probably own a home again.
Sure.
But right now, we want to own our experiences. We want to own our family time, and we can do that while renting very small or minimally or, living out of the turtleback and the 4Runner,
right.
And it's interesting to see that mind shift of over so many years of how, we thought we were going to own this and own that.
Right.
And now we're owning memories.
That's right.
Over physical things.
Well, and it's like Peter with Epic Family Road Trip put it so poignantly in one of our recent videos is you can always make more money, but you can't make more time.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I mean, that is really the sum and substance of it is we as a society, we value amazing jobs and the money that comes with them. And then, we creep our lifestyle to expand what we can afford, but at what expense?
Right.
And in that, we have to remember that there's multiple people listening right now in different places in their lives. So you might have been making minimum wage at a fast food restaurant and now you don't have a job at all. And you're listening to this going, there is no way in heck I am ever going to be able to go out there and travel and explore and do it to the level that I really want to at this stage. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you've got the people who are making money hand over fist, but boy, they're
working 70-hour work weeks.
Exactly. And they don't have they might have the funds, but they hardly have the time.
Yeah.
And then we've got the other people in the middle where these are families that are kind of ingrained in their commitments to soccer and school and all these things. So to travel on a grand scale seems very, very difficult. To go and pursue these experiences seems almost impossible to the level that we kind of portray in what we do.
Right.
And so I just want to say that for those who are listening right now, who are in one of those positions, it's all about baby steps.
Yes.
It's all about keeping things achievable. You don't have to take it to extremes right out of the gate. You don't have to have a brand new vehicle. You don't have to have a trailer. You could literally go to Walmart right now, spend $100 and get some decent camping gear to go and have fun. The main thing is to get outside and start doing it. Now, for those of you who have wanted to move towards traveling full time, like what we do, and that's where I'm coming to with this whole minimalist / intentionalist lifestyle is put together a 5-year plan.
Right.
Imagine yourself putting together a plan where the first 4 years of this plan, you're going to take every opportunity, every step to expand your capabilities, to learn new trades, to learn new skills, to find income streams that you can do remotely or that can operate passively, or you're just going to work every single shift of overtime possible for the next 4 years
to save money,
to save up. And then on the 5th year, that's your year that you quit your job, or you tell your boss, hey,
I'm working remotely.
These are the skill sets that I've put together. Maybe it means a career shift, a career change. But put together that plan and imagine yourself 5 years from now of taking advantage of every possible opportunity to change your career and your mindset, reduce your debt, reduce your expenses, maximize your income. And you would be surprised what just 4 short years can do for you.
Definitely.
When we first started this, we didn't just dive off the deep end. I had a background in electrical construction.
Yep.
I had safety nets in place. We had a nest egg in the bank account. I've had people who message me and say, hey, I'm quitting my job next week. I'm going to travel full time. How do you guys do it? Whoa.
Yeah. Please don't quit your job. You do that.
Stop right there.
Yeah.
Stop right there. Don't just dive off. Have a plan, be intentional, have safety nets, have backups. If this YouTube thing dried up tomorrow, I still have an active IBEW journeyman wireman ticket, and I can go work anywhere in the country.
Yep.
I can get my tools out. I'm fine with that. I can do that. You got to have those pieces in place so that if you do make that transition and become a full-time traveler, you have to have those pieces in place in case
something
happens. Maybe you get sick in the first 6 months, or you got to fall back on something. So don't be reckless about this.
Right.
Work on that 4-year plan on that amazing 5th year, and maybe you only travel for a year. But when you're lying on your deathbed years from now, looking back, are you going to be thinking about the cars, the TVs, the brand new iPhones? No. You're going to be thinking about those experiences with the people that you love. I got to see the Grand
Canyon with my kids and
the people that you met along the way.
Yeah.
Just thinking back on the people that we've run into and the relationships that's come from it. Pam and Stewie from Australia.
Yep.
Jessica and Jorge. Jason with Primal Outdoors. We've met some of the coolest, most amazing now friends through these adventures and stuff. And so, again, I'm not saying to get yourself overwhelmed with this. I'm just telling you our story, our experiences, and we're telling you it is worth the effort if you're willing to pursue that. If that's something that is in your heart that you just know you desire and you're passionate about, start today.
And a great example of that is our friends Forerunner for Adventure. They took I don't remember, 2 or 3 years or something like that.
I think it was almost 2 years.
Almost 2 years to save and plan and plan. And then they quit jobs and traveled south.
Right.
And they're Forerunner.
Yep.
And went into South America and everything and took a whole year doing that.
Yep.
And they're such a prime example of doing whatever it takes to scrimp and save and plan exactly what they wanted to do. And they did just that.
That's exactly right. And if you do get in a position where, after you've spent those 4 years and you've gotten into the groove of things, the way that we operate. So just to answer that question as to how we afford it is we're not just on YouTube. If we were relying on YouTube for our income, y'all, we would be broke. YouTube is so crazy with their algorithms. I've seen my views go up by 20% and my revenue go down by 80 in the same month. It's unpredictable.
Right.
YouTube will not. Some people have made it on YouTube. Don't get me wrong, but it's the 1%. It's not a significant number of people that are on YouTube. It's very, very few. And so what you have to have is multiple income streams. And so, We manage several different social media accounts for different outdoor brands. We developed our merchandise store, which is now, as of this year, become like its own
entity,
its own company. Like we are employing someone to manage all of that and expand its own brand.
Yeah.
So that it can continue to grow. And I make it sound like it's some multi-million company. Like
we literally just started.
We're literally making hundreds of dollars a month. It's incredible, but it could grow into something. And it's those micro income streams that you develop. The big one for us, though, the number one thing by far, is our patrons.
Yes.
So these are people who watch us on YouTube and go, I like what these people are doing. I am tired of paying money for satellite. I'm tired of paying money for cable. I just want to watch what
they're doing.
I really want to watch. And so the Patreon platform has just grown exponentially for a lot of different creators. And so, yeah, thank you again to all the patrons who support what we do. It's because of you that we can continue to do this and continue to grow.
Definitely.
And so that's really the bulk of it. We have a few affiliate programs. So like if you see us give out a discount code, generally, not every time, but generally there's like a small percentage of that comes back to us as a commission for, helping show that product and test that product,
right,
and recommend that product and stuff like that. They don't pay us to say it's good. It has to be good first.
Yes.
Just as
we
a
have
disclaimer.
to like it first.
Yeah. We're not going to push something just because. But it's all those little things working together that when you start putting them all in a basket, you go, oh, okay. And then you go, oh, okay, well, what's my bills this month? Oh, it's hardly anything. It's over here.
Right.
So that's really the secret to it all, is changing that skill set, finding those remote things that you can do, and reducing those expenses.
Right.
And you would be amazed, even if you don't do it to travel.
Right.
Even
if you have a simpler way of life.
Yeah. Even if you're not even interested in camping full time, you just like watching the show and you like hearing us talk about our backgrounds. Just imagine right now if you cut your expenses in half, what you could do with those hobbies and pastimes that you enjoy.
Absolutely. You have so much more time.
Yeah. So this applies to everyone. We're so caught up in this social cycle of lifestyle creep. We're living, they say that 8 out of 10 Americans live paycheck to paycheck.
Wow.
8 out of 10. That's incredible. Could you imagine how much easier you would breathe if you knew you could lose a job and be okay for 6 months?
Yeah.
So think of it in that way. If it's not about the travel for you, just think about how your life could change if you step back and said, I can be a bit more intentional about what I do.
Right.
And enhance and enrich my life because I'm not pursuing the things everyone else says I need to pursue, or social media says I need to pursue, or the advertisements say I need to pursue. Let's be intentional about life.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. It's not forever.
Right. Yeah, like I had said before, when we were going to move into the camper, I was like, I can do anything for a little while. It's not forever. This doesn't have to be for forever. You can do anything for a little while.
But the memories and experiences that you can walk away with are life-changing.
Absolutely.
Life-changing. So, well, babe, looks like the campfire's down to coals again. We've talked this one to death. I know this has been a very different podcast. I know that it might even be painful right now, and we only say it with the best of intentions. We only say it to challenge you to think about life in a new way, as we're all sitting here contemplating how we got to where we are and where we're going next. And so we wish you guys the best.
Absolutely.
All you guys who are still going hard out there, all those essential people keeping the country going, thank you so much for what you do. For those of you guys who are sitting home, stick with it, guys. We're going to get through it. Now's the time to plan. Now's the time to get ready for the next steps.
Right, absolutely. Such a poignant time to really evaluate your passions, your core values,
Absolutely.
And what you want to be intentional with after this. Because we're not going to come out the same.
Right.
We're not going to go back to normal. We're all going to be a little bit different.
We're all going to be a little bit different. And it's going to take courage. You know, no matter what circumstance you're in right now, it's going to take some courage for those next steps if you want to go down this path. You know, I always think about this quote by Theodore Roosevelt, and it says, "It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man in the arena whose face is marred by sweat and by dust and by blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best in the end knows the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place will never be with those cold and timid souls who have never known neither victory nor defeat." That was deep.
Yeah.
That was deep. People are going to love us or hate us now.
Yeah.
But you know what?
If anything, I could potentially see like a whole other podcast coming out of this. Like people asking questions and or commenting or wanting a further explanation of something. I could see.
Absolutely, because you're dealing with so many variables when it comes to people in different life situations.
Right.
And so to try and suggest various first steps in a single podcast to a myriad of different situations and circumstances is just impossible. But this is the the gauntlet has been thrown down.
Right.
You know, and I think that maybe that sounds bad. It's not like in a way it is a gauntlet because it is a challenge, but in another way it's coming up alongside you and putting your arm around their shoulder and saying, "How are you?
Yeah.
How's life? Is it going the way you want it to?
If not,
even if it's come crumbling down around you in this crazy time, maybe this is the time to pick yourself back up from the ashes and go a totally different direction with a totally different mindset."
Yeah.
Maybe you've told yourself you'll never get yourself in this financial position again. Maybe.
Well, then what are you going to do to make that not happen?
Exactly. You know? Or maybe you're the one who's worked thousands of hours to build something and then watch it crumble down around them right now. And you're saying, what was all that for? You know, like I told my son or my daughter no 1,000 times. I'm not going camping this weekend, or I'm not doing this with you because I have to go and do da-da-da.
Right.
When you're laying on your deathbed, how are you going to look back at that conversation? We only get one shot at all this.
Yep.
Let's make it count.
That's right.
Let's live.
Do our very best.
Absolutely. So, all right, guys. I hope you have enjoyed this podcast. I hope you've been inspired and challenged. I hope you don't hate us too much now because we love you, and that's why we bring it up.
Right.
So we hope you're doing amazing wherever you are in this world. Hope you're staying healthy, and we will catch you on the next podcast. Safe travels.